And now, this is what the people in the 1920s would have been complaining about. Welcome to another episode from the Ed Ed. About a week or two ago, I posted a video on this 1922 Westinghouse Aeriola radio that I had got up and running again with a Replica WD11 vacuum tube that actually uses a 5676 embedded inside a 3D printed model. And the radio seemed to work very nicely, other than the slightly uncertainty about the tickler. You could adjust the tickler, which is a Regen control, and never get any notable response as far as increased audio. And typically what you would expect is the radio will produce all kinds of howling and squealing noises, especially if you have another AM radio nearby. This radio, if you overdrive the Regen, will become a transmitter, and it'll transmit all this obnoxious sound and so forth that the nearby radio will receive. And that was kind of the common problem with these early radios with Regen, is people would drive them too hard and create all kinds of obnoxious troubles for the neighbors. And I could never witness any of that. And so, even though the radio worked fine, because obviously I have, at least at the very minimum, very strong radio stations nearby, and don't apparently really terribly need the Regen tickler feature, it seems like an indication that there might be something still slightly amiss on this guy. And talking to folks on Antique Radio Forum and Scott's Crystal Radio, the general consensus is I should be hearing some response from adjusting this tickler. So I think I'll open this guy up and have a look and see if there's any subtleties that are causing that to not quite work right. In case you folks happen to be coming along this video first and hadn't seen the previous video on the Westinghouse Aeriola Sr radio with its WD11 vacuum tube, basically this radio was a very early consumer product, and basically one of the very first ones you can get, and basically the grandfather, as it were, for all modern electronics today. And it's a very simple design that uses just a couple of variable coils that you can adjust their settings in relation to each other to tune the radio, and also to adjust the regeneration feedback loop that helps amplify very weak signals into a much stronger signal, which was a nice, clever way of getting away with just using a single vacuum tube and getting actually a pretty fair amount of performance. I thought maybe it'd be nice to give you a quick little fill-in of the history of this radio. The Westinghouse was needing to produce a product that could compete against RCA, and also trying to figure out the whole concept of broadcast radio. It was in the 1920s, early 20s. It's a very novel concept to basically transmit in the open air music and entertainment and news and so forth, and expect it to be paid for by advertising. And you needed to basically equip a meaningful audience to listen to this new radio station. And so the first thought was the RADA series of radios, which was probably the first truly mass market, mass volume produced radio. And then from there they followed up with the Aeriola series of radios in these little wooden boxes. The Aeriola Sr was a single tube radio, along with its counterpart, the Areola Jr, which was a little crystal radio set. And with these radios, with a minimum of training and minimum of controls, you could, as a consumer, be able to listen to these radios and actually get a good, useful listening experience with them without a lot of frustration compared to the earlier radios with the complexities of controls and big flooded liquid cell batteries and so forth. Then they followed on with a series of other products that would go with the Areola radios, such as another little duplicate box that was just basically an amplifier. And with that, you could take the output of the radio, instead of listening to it with headphones, you can now listen to it on a loudspeaker and share the whole program with the family in a much more comfortable, easygoing environment that we're much more familiar with today. And then from there, Westinghouse came up with a series of other little box radios that combined the amplifier and the tuner together. And then from there, of course, we get more into our familiar world of tabletop and floor model radios. So looking through the radio, I can't find anything wrong. The electrical circuit, everything looks very nice, and there's not a whole lot to go wrong with it. So then the thought finally dawned on me, well, maybe it's just my WD11 Replica tube. And so this tube here, a little more effort in making it high temperatures with ABS plastic and a copper tube and so forth, and it just wasn't necessary, all the extra effort. So I went back to the idea originally I was thinking of, which was simply using a lower temperature, easier to work with PLA plastic. And this is a plastic glass bulb, as it were. And by the way, if you want either of these files, they're on my Thingiverse account, so just go ahead and have a look at that. And refer back to the other video as far as how to wire this guy up. And also there's just lots of sites on the internet, especially on the Antique Radio Forum and so forth, on making these basically a mock-up tube, as it were, using the 5676. Most other people are using they're cutting out their parts out of bits of wood or what have you. And I don't know if I've seen anybody do 3D printed plastic. I think this is by far got to be the easiest method. So refer back to my video, and there's other resources and the description below on this video, and also the previous video of some time back. And so anyhow, have a look at the performance of the new tube. The new tube, like I was saying, is basically just this. It's the guts in here of a 5676 from resistors. For some reason, this one just doesn't quite want to perform as well. I could look at it on a signal generator and oscilloscope and almost see some regen, whereas this one works exceptionally well. So next up is I'll show you the radio using this tube and how remarkably effective it is in generating regen. Okay, so I have my radio set up here with usual battery packs and so forth, and I have a little cheap AM FM radio in the back there, the little red guy, and I have the little modern amplifier. And what I want to do is just kind of demonstrate regen with this guy, and so got it tuned to a nice radio station. And it's just amazing how much more responsive this tube is. It's just blows you away. So I got it tuned. I believe it's KOA radio, and I can now tweak the tweaker and trying to just get it to where I'm regenning. See if I can get that dial a little more visible. And it's a case of what can I do to get the most volume. Get the most volume. And I think the biggest trick is to find the maximum volume you can get with the least amount of filament current before you start to go into a totally uncontrolled regen, and it just starts to oscillate uncontrollably and really starts to feedback. So it's kind of this art of dialing these guys, because I can go a little too much filament current and start to produce too much feedback. But now I'm using more power than I really need to, so I can dial this down. And right now, this little amplifier I'm using, I got it tuned really low, and if I was to put the headphones on, this is a very comfortable volume, maybe a little bit of loud side. So it isn't like the little transistor amplifier is actually, you know, throwing off my results here. Now the thing is the little cheap AM radio here. If I turn this guy on, it's tuned to the same station. And now, this is what the people in the 1920s would have been complaining about. Now, if I turn off the amplifier on the for the Westinghouse radio here, and then do the regenerator here, the tweaker, you can definitely see how it's injecting a signal now into the radio. And that's, you know, the biggest problem with these early radios here is the problems of regen. See if I can turn this up a little bit more without shouting over it. Up to $600 when you register for BetMGM using my bonus code baseball. So if I turn this amplifier back on, you can get kind of a feel for it. So, you know, I think it kind of basically demonstrates it pretty nicely. Let's see here. I'll turn it slightly off. And let's see, I'll turn it off. So I'm not tuned now on the exact same station as this guy, and I'm still throwing a bunch of RF power back into the air from this radio, and this one is picking it up. So I'm going a pretty good distance away. And then from there, it seems like this radio now is no longer interfering when I get far enough past. But if I'm kind of close by the same frequency, and especially right on it, I'm really messing with my next door neighbor's radio signal here. So I thought I'd demonstrate that. I thought I was done with this radio, and it seemed to run very nicely. I was very pleased with it, and and I couldn't find out basically what the problems were. You know, I checked the grid leak, and I checked things like maybe the feedback coil here was maybe mounted on its shaft wrong or something like that, and it was 180 out of phase or something like that. Looked at every single electrical connection and so forth. Couldn't find anything wrong with the radio at all. So ultimately it was like, well, maybe it's the tube itself, and it looks like it is. This tube works exceptionally well. I don't know why. Whereas the original one I made, other than being a different style construction, there's really nothing different about it. So these tubes are 50 years old, and it could be my solder joint's no good, or I have maybe that lead is broken after all, or something like that. I'll have to look into the first one. But this one, I mean, the first one ran nicely enough, and if I didn't know about the history of these early Regen radios having this issue with the feedback, I would have said, yeah, great, it works beautifully, and it does, until you experience that lovely feedback. Let's take a look at our starting lineups for the night. So, anyhow, I thought that was kind of a neat little thing to check out, and so I guess I'll put it back in its box and demonstrate it to folks from time to time. Now it's working for sure really well. And anyhow, thanks for watching.